Quiet, numbskulls, I'm broadcasting.
The medical marijuana. The medical marijuana. Radio show. The medical marijuana for you and me. Ah, yeah, the medical marijuana. Whoa, 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 ah, yeah, the medical. It's the medical marijuana show. You will know.
I want to talk to you. I want to talk to you. Hey, boy, don't feel my world untrue. Yeah, I want to talk to you. My world can be true if you do what I tell you to. I want to talk to you.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Medical Marijuana Radio. This is for Saturday, the 6th of May, 2017. I'm your host, Larry Love, and we're here every week to bring you the latest information on medical cannabis use and recreational use from around the globe. Today, we're going to talk once again with one of my favorite people, Michael Krawitz, who is an advocate for veterans, for advocate for cannabis, medical cannabis, an advocate for ending the drug war, and we're going to talk a little bit about what Trump's position is and what all the hubbub has been over the last few days, and we'll talk about his trip to Vienna, where he spoke in front of a panel, and it's very interesting stuff. So he'll update us, and but first, as always, I've got news for you. Yes, and there's a lot of news. I'm just going to pretty much give you the headlines and tell you where to go read some of these stories. This is from the OCCnewspaper.com, written by Keith Mansour. He's got an article about how Colorado's seed-to-sale system is leaking cannabis into the black market. And you can, it just starts off that the metric cannabis tracking system in Colorado is suffering from some leakage from the supposedly stringent seed-to-sale system designed to prevent diversion from their regulated adult-use cannabis market. Although regulators have determined that there have been numerous violations, it's impossible to tell just how much marijuana is escaping the system and making it to the black market where it is untaxed and unregulated. They have, in the meantime, issued over $680,000 in fines on licenses that have been deemed in violation of the laws. There seems to be some loopholes, appear to be in a gray area where there are allowable losses under the rules. Retail outlets have been fined for selling cannabis outside of the tax and regulated system after reporting that cannabis was damaged and or contaminated. Again, you can go read the rest of that at OCCnewspaper.com. Next, just a few headlines. Cannabis oil from marijuana is having success as COPD treatment. I hope to have Jeff Waters on the next week or so, who's a COPD patient. He's going to tell us all about that. In Georgia, a lawmaker is delivering cannabis oil while dodging felony charges. This is from NBCnews.com, Macon, Georgia. Once a month, a cardboard box from Colorado appears at the office of a conservative Christian lawmaker in central Georgia, filled with derivatives of marijuana to be distributed around the state in the shadows of the law. Representative Alan Peake is taking matters into his own hands. He's shepherding cannabis oil to hundreds of sick people who are now allowed by the state to possess marijuana but have no legal way of getting it. So he, a representative, a politician, a Christian, is bringing it across state lines, and he's putting himself at risk. I like that. Next headline, if you're buying your weed solely based on the THC level, you're doing it wrong. The entourage effect of the terpene and cannabinoid content plays a far greater role in determining your experience. You can read this article at medium.com. And let's see, Leafly or Leafly, I'm not really sure how they pronounce that, but it's a website, leafly.com, that has a lot of information. They have an article dated April 28th, just last couple of days ago, saying that Washington, Leafly investigation is this is Washington State, top cannabis lab inflating the THC numbers. So they're looking at Peak Analytics, the state's largest cannabis testing lab, and there's been some controversy about artificially reporting high THC levels. I guess that, and rejecting an abnormally low portion of the cannabis samples for microbial contamination. So there's some shenanigans going on. It's going to be a learning experience. And last but not least, the Florida medical marijuana bill is dead for this legislative session, and they're not allowing edibles and smoking and vaping, and it's really not a great medical cannabis program. More on that soon. We discussed a little bit about this with Michael Krawitz in our interview coming up shortly, but first, here is Trump's indicating where he stands on medical marijuana for the first time since he was elected, and we'll discuss this later with Michael.
It looks like Congress has no interest in cracking down on state medical marijuana laws. How do we know? Because it's explicitly written into the newly unveiled budget bill, which will fund federal agencies through the end of September. Tucked away on pages 230 and 231 of the 1,665-page bill is what's now known as the Rohrabacher-Blumenauer Amendment. The provision says the U.S. Department of Justice can't use any funds on medical marijuana prosecutions. Attorney General Jeff Sessions said back in March that he believes medical marijuana has been hyped, maybe too much, but the provision isn't a complete blow to Sessions' marijuana fight. It does not prevent the DOJ from going after recreational marijuana laws that are on the books in 8 states and the District of Columbia. And its protection of medical marijuana businesses and users only lasts through this current budget bill, but the amendment has been included in every budget bill since 2014, so it could likely be included in the next one too. The budget bill lists 44 states with some sort of medical marijuana law.
And again, we'll try to decipher that with Michael Krawitz in the second half of the show. Meanwhile, Trump has made Governor Cheesesteak Christie the head of the opioid epidemic. And this is some of his comments this week.
It's crazy. We're dying here. You all have to speak out against it. Because believe me, the professional pot lobby, which is only about making money off this, is going to spend the money they need to get this legalized. And watch what happens in your hospitals. Watch what happens in your medical practices. Watch what happens in your neighborhoods. I can't wait. You know, people aren't going to yell and scream when the first headshot opens in Newark or Patterson or Camden or Trenton. But man, I can't wait for the first one to open in Short Hills. I can't wait for the first one to open in my old hometown of Livingston. I can't wait until it comes to Cherry Hill. All of a sudden, it's going to be a different ballgame then. And then what's that mean? It's okay to do this just in our cities, with our urban population, but keep it away from our godforsaken suburbs? You all, many of you in this audience live in those suburbs. I don't care where you are. Let's go to Margate, down Atlantic County. I can't wait to see the town council considering that, variance to build the pot shop in downtown Margate.
Oh my God. Well, I can't wait until one of his loved ones needs some medical cannabis for some reason. That's what I can't wait for. These people that are just denying science is just totally ridiculous. And there's no way you can deny the science, because this next gentleman, Professor Raphael Mechoulam, who has been in the States over the last week or so, giving some speeches and talks and so forth, He's been studying this plant for 60 years. And here's a nice piece, a positive piece, reality, not the fake news and the denying and the denial of science. This is the real science. This is the scientist.
Now, you asked about cancer.
Yeah.
Here it's I don't find the right word. It's a sad situation. Thousands of patients are using medical cannabis against their cancer. And some of them report that it works very well, whatever that means. There hasn't been a single clinical trial with cannabinoids against any cancer. Now, that I don't understand. I mean, it's being used.
Yeah.
People say that it's effective. There
It's anecdotal evidence, but you need clinical trials.
So people use medical cannabis against cancer without knowing what to do with it. Do we need a lot of THC? Do we need a lot of cannabidiol? We have done work with in one of the hospitals, as well as here with some of my neighbors that work on cannabis. Most definitely, both THC and CBD and many of the other, as I said, 100 compounds that are closely related to cannabis act on cancer cells, So we're working now in mice. But there is a difference. I mean, humans are not mice.
Yeah.
Until it's done in humans, we are not there. Now, why for having governments or whoever bodies that do work done anything in cancer? They say it's okay for cancer. What does it mean it's okay? I mean, I don't know what it is.
People want results.
Yes, and we don't have any results in humans.
Right.
Any explanation for that? The answer is we have no explanation why there have been no clinical trials. Now, governments don't usually initiate clinical trials. That's true. But this is a very special case. Companies don't do it, and we have anecdotal evidence that it acts. So there should be somebody maybe our Ministry of Health, doing the clinical trial.
Has the impression that the government, to a certain extent, all governments seem to be scared to grasp the nettle of separating the illegal use and the legal use.
Yeah.
And maybe it's political lobbying that's needed.
Probably they don't understand it. So we are trying now. There is a initial clinical trial starting at Hadassah. There are a few initial clinical trials starting in Tel Aviv. We found a donor who is going to support the work in Tel Aviv and glioma.
Right.
And we have found
That's a brain tumor, glioma.
Yes.
Glioma.
And there are some other brain tumors, and maybe we're going to work on a brain tumor in another hospital. But it should not be done in that small way. It should be done in a major way. I mean, okay, somebody should spend so many millions to find out whether the anecdotal evidence is correct and whether one should use for this type of cancer a certain mixture or one of the compounds, for another type of cancer, another mixture or another pure compound. This we should know. We should have known about that 10 years ago.
Maybe we need to get the politicians to watch Live Doctors, and especially this interview, and you never know what could happen after that.
Completely right.
And the interesting thing, of course, is that the United States has been funding Professor Raphael Mechoulam's work to the tune of millions of dollars over the last bunch of years. And of course, the United States has a patent on some cannabinoids and so forth in U.S. patent number 6630507, which we've talked about before. So embrace technology, embrace science, and politicians should not be involved in people's health, that's for sure. We talked a few minutes ago, an article that the medical program in Florida is not going to move forward. Here's a story from Fort Lauderdale man who says he's going to keep smoking marijuana. Geez, I just sounded like Session. Marijuana. Anyway, he's going to keep smoking even though it's not legal to smoke cannabis in Florida. And he's on TV talking about it.
News investigation. Right now, Florida lawmakers are debating how to regulate the use of medical marijuana, but patients complain that proposed restrictions on use are unconstitutional.
Local 10 investigator Bob Norman sat down with one local man who says he must break the law every day and will almost surely be forced to continue to do so even after any new law is enacted. Here's Bob's report.
Cancer survivor Bruce Vanneman says a quick puff of cannabis in the morning is a godsend.
And that's about all I really need. That stops my nausea.
Relieving the gut-churning pain that routinely hits him since surgeons removed 5 feet of his intestine to treat his non-Hodgkin's lymphoma.
In the mornings is the worst for me. The first thing I do is I'll have a quick smoke. Then that'll let me have something to eat.
But it also could land him in jail. Vanneman, now in remission, lives in Fort Lauderdale, and even though cannabis has been recommended by several of his doctors and he has a medical need card from Colorado, smoking it is still illegal in Florida and will likely remain so even after the legislature is expected to pass a medicinal marijuana bill this week.
We have banned it entirely.
Both the Senate and House versions of the bill outlaw smoking as a treatment, meaning the actual dried flower will continue to be illegal for patients.
The hypocrisy is just disgusting.
Attorney Michael Minardi said the smoking ban is a lawsuit waiting to happen.
They're taking the intent of the amendment and they are spitting on us.
Vanneman and numerous other patients, including Kathy Jordan, one of the state's longest living ALS patients,
I use cannabis every day,
contend smoking is their best medicine.
We have plenty of evidence that it does work.
Vanneman says until the state allows smoking, he'll remain an outlaw.
That decision between a doctor and a patient is sacred. It is never between the state administrators and a patient or the politicians.
In Fort Lauderdale, Bob Norman, Local 10 News.
And Bob tells us that neither version of the bill allows so-called vaping or edibles. A final bill is expected to be passed by the end of this week.
Well, it didn't pass, and there is no vaping, and there's no edibles, and there's no smoking. And, I've cited this study many times on this program, and you should also cite it when people say, smoking anything you burn and smoke can't be good for you. Well, there is no proof that smoking cannabis causes any kind of lung cancer. As a matter of fact, it improves, like we've said many times, there's a study out there, it improves lung function and lung volume. So use that information when you hear people disparaging the use of smoking cannabis, because as we know, smoking it and vaping it is the fastest way to get some relief from pain and other symptoms using medical cannabis. So here's another man. An Ohio man is in the middle of a murky situation with medical marijuana, just like the gentleman in Florida. Another story, people fighting for their rights.
Imagine opening your front door this morning to a team of drug agents being targeted as a criminal, but arguably innocent of any crime. That is exactly what happened to one local man last month. He is caught in the middle of Ohio's new murky medical marijuana law, and this morning he's talking only to the E-Team's Kristen Volk. And Kristen, you're learning this case likely the first of its kind in the state.
Yeah, Karina, it's also a wake-up call for anybody who may look to marijuana for medicine at a time when the new law remains largely undefined and the door wide open for police who still label any kind of marijuana for any purpose illegal.
The first thing that ran through our mind was, why are you here?
His face hidden, his voice distorted. This man explains how a morning door knock nearly changed the course of his life.
We were escorted into our family room and we were basically monitored while they did the search.
No longer a medical marijuana patient, instead a suspected drug dealer. His wife and 2 daughters home at the time.
Did they go through every room?
Pretty much. Every room, every nook and cranny.
A team of police officers and detectives from the Southeast Area Law Enforcement Task Force handed him a search warrant, saying they were looking for marijuana, and they found it in the form of this.
How much was there?
Less than a misdemeanor's amount.
Less than a quarter cup of marijuana oil extract. The agents treated it as a drug, a criminal possession, and they confiscated it. Yet under Ohio's new medical marijuana law, it's his medicine.
All of a sudden, I will not be able to see.
This man vaporizes marijuana for his glaucoma, and he has a written doctor's recommendation to use it for medicinal purposes. His disease qualified by the state for medical marijuana use.
The state has said on their website for the marijuana policy program, they have basically outlined the exact process that I followed.
From our standpoint, it's obviously still deemed criminal to possess or sell.
But the Regional Drug Task Force involved in this case tells me it does not care whether this man or anyone else follows the few guidelines already set forth by the state.
There's nothing in place to determine that you're violation-free.
That's because the task force says it won't recognize medical marijuana as being legal, even though the law passed last year, until the state releases its specific rules about it in September.
The last thing you want to do is break the law.
The task force never charged the man you just heard from. They even returned his marijuana, saying because he had so little of it, it would have been a misdemeanor charge, and that is inconsistent with the purpose of the task force. For the E-Team, I'm Kristen Volk.
What a waste of time and money and stress that this Ohio man had to go through. It's really ridiculous that some of these law enforcement agencies will not abide by the state laws that they're working in. All right, before we talk to Michael Krawitz, here is a clip of Michael earlier in the week in New York State talking about expanding the medical marijuana for PTSD. He's on a panel with a couple other people.
Would not limit people who are veterans with PTSD to accessing medical marijuana under this legislation, right? I mean, there are other people who suffer from PTSD from accidents, as mentioned. So it's not just veterans, but the veteran angle, I would assume, Assemblyman Rea, is in fact what...
Makes it a lot more sellable.
Right, indeed. Is that what is convincing your colleagues?
You know, I remember the days when, I've been here 15 years, when virtually every Republican voted no on any form of medical marijuana bill. Now you see the leader of the Assembly, Brian Kolb, who's actually or I think going to be a co-sponsor on this bill. So times change, you know, and there comes a point when you have so many states that have legalized recreational use. Why should we be the ones to tell patients that, well, yeah, you could move to Colorado and buy it all day long on the street, but we're not even going to let you get it in a medical form. And I think that's doing a disservice for taxpayers, quite honestly.
Does that concern you, though, Mr. Krawitz? I mean, you know, part of the problem, medical marijuana advocates often get a little bit squeamish about discussing full legalization because it sort of muddies the waters a little bit, and it makes the conversation more difficult, because particularly law enforcement, pro-law enforcement types get very anxious about that discussion.
Well, the organization I work with, Veterans for Medical Cannabis Access, we're medical. We work on medical access. But we do recognize that the medical programs that states set up don't reach everyone. If you look at the numbers, there's going to be a lot of gaps. And we're hoping that with any access program, that will increase the access, you know, across the board.
Well, and
but
it's not covered by insurance either.
There you go.
So it's difficult to access it if you can't afford it as well.
And it is expensive. I spoke to an individual last night who showed me their card and told me it's upwards of $120 for a little tiny bit. And when she can't get it, what does she do? She goes down the street and buys it for 1/4 of the price.
I think that there's also another issue. VA is a federal entity.
Yes.
Every veteran that gets services from the VA has to spend some time, quality time, in a federal establishment, federal buildings, federal property. We're very conscious of that relationship with the federal government, and it makes a lot of veterans very uncomfortable.
Well, and they wouldn't get a prescription from there, right?
The notion of going in and registering in a program, becoming a card holder, having their name logged with the authorities, they're very afraid that that's going to wind up in the wrong hands, that could be a problem. We haven't seen a problem, and we do have VA policy that makes it clear that the veterans are supposed to be able to use the medical marijuana, not be punished at the VA, but that doesn't get rid of the concern. And I think that's one of the reasons why legalization reaches a larger audience.
Well,
it's just that fear of participating in a program where your name's going to be on a list.
And a new administration in the White House, and it's not exactly clear what their policies are going to be going forward.
And we'll be right back with Michael Krawitz to talk a little bit about what could be the policies going forward, trying to decipher what's going on currently. And we'll be back with Michael right after this.
It's all about the 420 MMJ Radio. The medical marijuana. The medical marijuana radio show.
Hi, this is Steve D'Angelo, and you are listening to Medical Marijuana Radio.
And we're back, and I'm really happy to have Michael Krawitz back again. He was on in March before he took his trip to Vienna. And first, Michael, welcome back again. And let's talk about Trump's statement and what he signed on Friday in regard to a lot of stuff. But it seems that the media outlets are saying that he's going to go against medical cannabis and not go with what the Congress has built into the budget. So explain that to us, if you could, please.
Well, first, thank you so much for welcoming me back. I'm really, really happy to be back. Went also to Barcelona, and we'll have to talk about that as well. But I think the signing document, the statement that President Trump put out is pretty interesting, but I'm not sure that it means anything. He's essentially listed a whole bunch of points of contention that he has with elements of the spending bill that he's evidently signing into law. And as he's signing into law, he's taking exception to the thing that he's signing into law and saying that he's not going to follow it. I don't know what that means, to be honest with you. And as he goes down, he lists point by point various points, various elements of the spending bill by number and gives objection. But then he gets to medical marijuana, and he just states the number. He states that it's medical marijuana, and he just simply states that his office will do what is within the constitutional responsibilities of his office to do, and then he moves on. In other words, there is no particular objection. There's no big argument. There's nothing there, just other than really on its face, him saying that he's going to follow the Constitution in this case. I don't know what that means either, but it doesn't sound bad. It's certainly not as bad as the other parts of the
well, the headlines, that
the headlines ran with it. Golly, they ran with it. But I don't know that I agree with their take on it at all.
Yeah, it seems to be the headlines were threatening, saying Trump is going against medical cannabis. But his statement several times earlier has been that the states, he believes in the states' rights as far as medical is concerned.
You got to be careful. There's an old saying that even the broken clock is right twice a day.
Right.
So if you're just automatically saying, oh, that clock's wrong, at that exact moment, the moment when it was right, then you look like a complete idiot. Just keep that in mind.
Yeah, I do keep that in mind, and I think that a lot of things Trump does is making him look like a complete idiot. That's for darn sure. But but built into the budget was Rohrabacher and who was the other one? Just some protections for medical cannabis states and so forth.
It's your kind of, I guess, perennial protections in the spending bill that just pulls back any funding that would go to the DEA to carry out their normal routine duties of harassing people over marijuana. If harassing people over marijuana happen to intervene with the state's medical marijuana program. They actually in court have argued, well, that only means that we can't go after state officials. No, the court argued that anyone that was enacting the state medical marijuana program would indeed be protected from the DEA being able to spend copious amounts of funds on harassing them. So it is kind of a tether that we have on the DEA in states where we have legal access to cannabis for medicine. And it's an important tether. I don't know how much it really, again, in the real world, how much does that really interfere with what the DEA would like to do day to day? I don't know. They typically like to go after the actual bad guys, the guys that the medical marijuana industry on all things considered would probably not appreciate either. It's hard to make those sort of determinations because we frankly have political opponents in the DEA who would like to play us against them games and create opponents within our industry. So we have to almost knee-jerkily react by protecting those in our industry to the extent that we may even protect someone that doesn't deserve protecting, rather than immediately disregarding someone just because the DEA says they're the bad guy.
Well, the DEA, cannabis has been their bread and butter for years, and I think they're getting paranoid about not having anything to do. So they've been against it, and they're not seeing the light, so to speak. But
I don't know. We're in a surreal moment right now where we've got, as this election was unfolding, and I was in New York in May, and I listened to some of the luminaries in our cannabis movement talking about the worst case scenario not being Trump getting elected, but Trump getting elected and Governor Christie being the Attorney General, because as they said it, quote, that he would wake up each morning thinking of ways to screw with us. And then a little while later, he's not going to be the Attorney General. It's going to be Sessions, Senator Sessions. And Sessions is the worst case scenario. It's a worse case scenario than the worst case scenario. It's a guy who reportedly, talked lovingly about the KKK. This is a guy that wasn't allowed to be a judge because of not being confirmed by the Senate.
Right.
And then they turned around and gave him another confirmation hearing. I, for one, think if you fail to get a confirmation job, you don't get to come back and apply for an even higher ranking confirmation job.
Yeah.
And
Sessions is famous for saying, while he was praising the KKK, he says, "I really liked the KKK until I found out they smoked marijuana."
Yeah, that sounds like Senator Sessions.
He absolutely said
Attorney
that.
General Sessions. Yeah.
Unbelievable.
So, but what can he do? That's why I say we're in a surreal moment, though, because what can he do? What can he really do? I'll tell you one thing. I work with 2/3 of the Virginia delegation that I know of. The three legislators that I'm, trying to work with. I'm working with 2 out of 3 of them. They're all Republicans, and we've got bills on the House floor from 2 of them that are, progressive reform cannabis bills. One of them's real progressive, and that's from Republicans. So we have a lot of Republicans that are working on reform, a lot of Republicans that understand medical cannabis, a lot of Republicans that are come from states that don't have medical cannabis programs, but they got CBD access programs. They know about little children benefiting from this stuff. I mean,
Right, but that's a problem, Michael, that I really wanted to talk to you about. I was hoping to have somebody on from Florida today. Florida and these other states.
They just killed the bill yesterday.
Yeah, they killed the bill. They don't want any edibles. They don't want any smoking. No vaping.
Now, be careful who you say where you bandy around the word "they" there in this case for sure, because a surreal situation unfolded in Florida where our opposition, when I say our, I mean the entire cannabis movement's opposition, namely the Drug Free America Foundation, Betty Sembler, Melvin Sembler, these guys. They staked out Florida. They put all their eggs into Florida. What I mean by that, they didn't put any money, hardly at all, into trying to stop legalization in Alaska, Oregon, Colorado, Washington. No, they put all their eggs into stopping Florida. And they did stop it for many years. Even as they got over 50% of the vote, they still stopped them from succeeding because they needed a higher threshold because it was a constitutional amendment, their medical marijuana provision. The sky's going to fall. Every corner is going to have a crack house like marijuana distribution site. It's going to be horrible. They paid huge dollars for slick, doctors that looked like they were selling Viagra to sell you against cannabis. It was really amazing. And what happens the minute the law passes, finally, with over 70% of the vote? They step in like they're the experts, and the legislature greets them with evidently open arms. And these same people that were lying to the public about medical cannabis to try to stop the initiative couldn't stop the initiative, failed miserably. And as the failures that they are, they get this success reward of being rewarded with the ability to write the new law.
Okay, but I'm sorry to interrupt, but isn't what they're doing really not helping the sick people by not giving them the best part of the medicine?
There is now a constitutional amendment on the books in Florida giving you the right to the things that the amendment stated that you'll have the right to: access cannabis for post-traumatic stress, etc. If they step in and they make it overly restrictive, they're just going to go to court. These people are people that don't care about the community at all. They don't care about the patients that they're hurting, but even more, they don't care about the community at large that is going to have to eventually come to terms with the reality of the situation that they have now got in the law in Florida and enact the will of the voters and enact the science and evidence-based medicine options that have been presented to them. But in the meantime, what they'll do is create a mired mess that the state has to then go through in court. And evidently that they're just not going to give up until that outcome is the one that they have to live with in Florida. And yeah, the patients in the end suffer the most, but the society at large suffers, through this entire
But is it a step forward to give states these CBD only non-psychoactive cannabis, or do you think that it's really a step backwards to allow this to happen? Because it's going to take a lot of time to change from a CBD only, going through the system and so forth to allow for smoking and for vaping and for edibles. That's the real medicine. So would you personally rather see that kind of a MMJ program fail until they can actually pass one that is the real medicine, or do you think it's a step forward? I don't know the answer to that myself.
I think looking at it hypothetically, it's almost too difficult of a question for me to imagine, enough scenarios to really give you an answer. But I can observe what's happened while we've had these laws, and they've had a positive impact. The states that have CBD only laws, the representatives in Congress have, in some cases, changed their tunes. In some cases, the individuals working on these things, realize that the CBD alone, all by itself in a vacuum, is not the best medicine for them and their child, and they're activated to do more, and it's sort of an incremental step in the right direction.
But it's all about us getting high. They don't want us getting high from the THC. That's the only reason.
No, you gotta. I think you gotta take the long view on the actual opposition and realize that they don't know what they want. Because if you go back far enough, you realize that they gave us THC to try to dissuade us from marijuana. Remember? Marinol was created by the government to try to stop Bob Randall. I mean, straight up, if you read the history books, that's what you'll take away from it. And it didn't work. It didn't stop it. In fact, Marinol didn't even slow down the medical marijuana movement. Their ideas are wholly outside of the universe that we live in. They seem completely disjoint from the realities that we face day to day. If they would just talk to us before they come up with some of these crazy ideas and the bowels.
The irony, though, Michael, is that these politicians all discuss this while they're having a 3-martini lunch, and they're telling us, well, let's give them the CBD because they don't get psychoactive. It's really.
I agree with the hypocrisy of your comparison, but not the reality of it. I don't think they think about it at all.
That's probably even worse that they don't think about it.
It's just the status quo, and it's the way it is, and you got all the different. Nowadays you got a real situation brewing, and I think people that are involved in grassroots cannabis cultivation, grassroots activism on cannabis access for medicine or not, but grassroots level, and certainly patients and their caregivers and their doctors and everyone connected to them in that way need to really pay attention to what's going on out there in the world, because the world that we've created in the medical marijuana world is a real friendly place based on, really kind of compassionate base. And a lot of information is available, a lot of things that we do as patients, a lot of products that we have available. These things become less and less available as we get closer and closer to full-on legalization. And the tension against our kind of freedom that we've had to be able to have this kind of free, like, for example, if you're dispensing cannabis legally, absolutely legally, then you're bound by a lot of laws as far as what kind of claims you can make, telling them about medicinal effects and things like that. You become much more constrained. Just for example.
Right. Listen, when I managed a dispensary here in New Mexico for 2 years, I was breaking federal law every day, and I knew it. But, I believe in states' rights as well. So you got to do what you got to do.
But you know what I mean? When it becomes a Revco cannabis outlet, it's going to be somebody there that, knows about as much about the background of the cannabis that you're getting over the counter as the Starbucks person knows about the coffee beans that they're selling.
Absolutely. Let's move real quickly and tell me about your trip to Vienna. And I know that you had a sit down with the head of NIDA. Let's talk about that a little bit, if you could.
Sure. Well, first of all, I stopped at Barcelona. I've never been to Barcelona before, and attended and spoke at the ArcView Investors Summit, which is really fascinating for me. I've never interacted with that kind of part of the industry, and it was very well received. I told them about the work that we're doing at the World Health Organization and everything, and got a few good questions, and got to sit on a panel with one of my mentors, Rob Campia, from Marijuana Policy Project, and you got to have the ability for us to hear each other spiel firsthand, which we don't get to do very often. Yeah, it was a really great experience, and I think the takeaway from that is that the patients are basically aligned with the industry if the industry actually serves its own interests. But I'm not convinced that the industry will always serve its own interests. So
yeah, I understand. Well, there's a greed factor in our industry that is terrible. But so tell me about Nora Volkov.
So yeah, I went to these meetings in Vienna, Austria. It's the International Narcotics Control Program. The day-to-day operations of that program are handled by what's called the Commission on Narcotic Drugs. It's, I think, 53 countries elect representatives to be members of this commission and make decisions on an annual basis that affect the international treaty system, the treaty system that our I don't even know what word to put on, beloved Harry Anslinger helped kick into motion in the 1960s. And it was updated in the 70s and 80s that prohibits the non-medical, non-scientific use of drugs worldwide, an agreement that countries sign into and then self-enforce. It's a voluntary agreement amongst nations. And at this meeting, there are side events. There are plenary events as part of the process, and I can talk about those if you want. But then there are side events, and some of the side events are more interesting than anything that happens on the main floor. And the one side event that you're talking about there was put on by USA, our good old United States of America government, led by the moderator of the side event panel was the Office of National Drug Control Policy. And they had speaking the DEA and the Justice Department, as well as a fellow from Britain talking about their work playing whack-a-mole with synthetic drugs. It was actually quite interesting. And Nora Volkov speaking for NIDA, National Institutes of Drug Abuse. And Nora gets up there, and first of all, I didn't have any beef with what the Justice Department said and what DEA. They were talking about how difficult it is to deal with meth, lab cleanup, and it all seemed pretty practical and reasonable kind of stuff they were dealing with, trying to deal with the unreasonable, side effects of the drug war. They just. Here, I'm not complaining about what they had to say, but NIDA, she spins this yarn. First of all, she attacks Colorado, which is funny because years past it was always California, this or that. California's medical marijuana law is too liberal. This or that. Colorado's medical marijuana law is not that liberal. It's certainly not California's law, and it's it was very well implemented and well regulated, and the regulations were part of the basis for very good legalization law, which is even more regulated. So to pick on Colorado is funny to me, but anyway, she essentially spins this yarn using numbers and data and graphs and charts to say that marijuana, number one, she makes this claim that anyone can get marijuana under their medical marijuana law. The medical marijuana law, she's not talking about legalization. She's saying that in Colorado's medical marijuana law is so lenient, anyone can get a license, as she said it, to get medical marijuana. And therefore, it's just, quasi-legalization. And then she starts just making these conjectures about what it's like under legalization, as if that's legalization, and as if those charts and graphs represent legalization because of the yarn that she just spun. And then she starts making this conjecture based on those charts and graphs that if you project these numbers out and you look at the way alcohol and you look at the way tobacco and you look at the way heroin charts and graphs go and you look at this and that, you can see that this or that, marijuana is just as bad as heroin.
Wow.
What? And that's essentially the game she's playing. She's any problem from marijuana is only limited by its very, very effective enforcement of our laws, has prevented its use. If you allow that use to increase, you'll see the same problems that you see with tobacco, alcohol. Just completely ignorant of the differences pharmacologically between all these very disparate substances.
So does the audience gasp?
I almost lost it. I got up there. What I said in my response was, first of all, challenging her first statement. It just so happened the week before I was there in Vienna, the guys that I'm working with in Colorado, Matt Call, a bunch of other people were telling me about how they were over in the State House presenting testimony on a bill to add post-traumatic stress as a qualifying condition. So I have vets that can't get access to the program because they don't have post-traumatic stress as a qualifying condition, going and testifying in the legislature to add that condition. They've never added a condition in the whole history of their law since the medical marijuana was passed, and yet she's going to say it's overly lenient. And I've got vets there testifying to the opposite. So that's just a start. And then I dug into her and I said, every single one of these patients in the Colorado medical marijuana program has a piece of paper signed by a doctor. A doctor has certified that they recommend cannabis for this patient under those circumstances. You're up here as a federal official getting in between the doctor-patient relationship on a mass scale, thousands of patients and their doctors, and ridiculing them without knowing anything about them or anything about their cases, anything about their history, anything about their file. And I went one step further and I said, I looked her in the eye and I looked at your boss, the ONDCP in the eye, and I said, I think you may be overstepping your authority within the executive branch under the U.S. Constitution by doing so.
Nice. So is this on tape somewhere that we can see this?
Yeah, the whole thing was recorded, and I can't find the recording. I might have to go back to Vienna next year to get the bloody recording, but I'll actually get the recording and the transcript of this.
Well, it sounds, it sounds like I would love to hear that and see her reaction. Did she come back at you with anything, or could she not say anything?
She didn't have as slick a patent response as she has had in the past for other things. For that, she essentially just went into, we're studying cannabis post-traumatic stress, and talking about Dr. Sisley's study. And
so let me ask you this: how come these people say there's not enough research and blah blah blah? But there's one statistic that is not really being quoted like it should be. For instance, last night on Bill Maher's show on HBO, he had John Kasich from where is he from? Ohio, I guess, and he was talking about the opioid problem, but nobody on TV is saying, you know what? States that have legal cannabis, medical or recreational, have a 25% less opioid abuse problem. Now, this is the biggest problem that they're talking about. And even I played earlier on the show before I interviewed you, Chris Christie, who's in charge of the opioid epidemic, thanks to Trump. They don't know. They don't talk about this. They're not talking about how it's.
Let's talk about it for a second, because coincidentally, after I had my question, representative of the Vicente Cederberg law firm from Colorado, who was there with NGO credentials observing all this stuff, spoke up. A great guy from their. Frank from their law firm, and he asked a question about the overdose reduction. He said, the Journal of the American Medical Association reports this 25% reduction, and I was amazed at Nora Volkow's answer, because a year earlier I had spoken to her privately and I brought up the NIDA, the JAMA article, and she just dismissed it, and I was very vehemently opposed to that position. I let her know it, and I was amazed that she dismissed him exactly the same way. She learned nothing from communicating with me the year before. And what Frank did, of course, was he followed up, and he said, she this is what she said, that this wasn't a decrease in the rate of overdose. It was a decrease in the rate of increase of overdose, which of course Frank was just incredulous. That's not good. You know, if you got an epidemic and you can slow it down, that's not good. And she just didn't even get it. She don't even. And I think her response is actually better than if you saw the Attorney General Sessions just dismissed it completely, as if it was just a farce, as if it was just whimsy.
Right.
That can't in any way be connected to helping people break the bond of opiate addiction.
You know,
and I think they just don't take it seriously. They don't understand the statistics because they're just not taking it even seriously enough. But a JAMA article, I mean, for Christ's sakes, this wasn't put out in high time.
You know, even a few years ago when Bloomberg was the mayor of New York, he actually on TV had the audacity to say that medical marijuana is the biggest hoax of our time. And he's not a stupid person. I don't know if he's come around or not, but I mean, this stuff is out there. People still, and Sessions, you know, Sessions has, you know, just people that smoke marijuana are bad people. And it's just crazy, outrageous. But just to tie things up, Mike, you have anything? Where are you going next? Is there something's happening this week, right?
Well, I just, you know, I can't get off that last subject because
go ahead.
It seems to me that the person who most objects is the person with something to hide.
Absolutely,
and
it's thou doth protest too much.
I wouldn't be surprised. We come to find out that Sessions smoked a lot of marijuana and he detests himself for doing it. He detests the people he hung out with and himself at that time of his life, which is probably the only time that I ever would have liked him. But that's a side point. And they're literally hiding themselves by taking these positions. The position rings true to me, to people that I've known in the movement that have nothing wrong with them, there's nothing medically wrong with them, and they pontificate about medical marijuana being this or being that from their high, lofty position as a pothead. And I got to tell you that you don't know nothing.
I agree, and it's just really sad that when people like, you know, scientists, I mean, Nora Volker, she's a doctor, right? She's a physician. And
should know better. She should know better.
She should know better, and they deny the science. They deny that, you know, Professor Raphael Mechoulam has been doing this stuff for 60 years, and that there is data out there. And
this is my beef with NIDA, straight up. I say that when you give me a study that says that the active ingredient in cannabis does something, then I can, you know, extrapolate that and say, well, the cannabis probably does that. And if you give me all this science about endocannabinoids and how cannabis, you know, activates this endocannabinoid system, and this endocannabinoid system is doing this and that and the other thing, then I can extrapolate that cannabis, you know, especially that it matches up with the thousands of case studies that we have of the reports of what people are saying it does. It all seems to lock in pretty good. I kind of, you know, work with this stuff and I paint a picture in my mind. But evidently NIDA can only work with one color, black on a white background. And everything that I'm looking at is irrelevant to them. Cannabinoid studies are relevant. You know, Sesamet, THC, Marinol, all these different studies are relevant.
Well, they were out to prove that marijuana was bad and not good and not medicine, and they can't get out of that.
There's an irony to that, because when they were shoving that down our throats years ago, I'm just old enough to remember, and I'm sure you are too, that they took a single rat study and they would run with it. Oh my God. Humans could die. How do you know this? Because we killed a rat.
Yeah, I know. Well, you know what? We need some positive vibrations, and you are certainly one of the guys out there that travels the world to bring the truth and the reality to people of the earth, and I appreciate the fact that you do that. Just real quick, something's coming up this week in Washington, D.C., right, that you're going to?
Yeah, so my calendar real quick. Monday, I'll be with Weed for Warriors in D.C., DCMJ. Protests that they're having to support veterans, get the word out. You know that you know the VA is still pumping out painkillers and not able to handle cannabis. And people need to know this and how cannabis can help. You know, in this especially what we were just talking about and all those points. And up in November coming up, it's worth putting on your calendar to pay attention to World Health Organization. I'm involved with them now on this critical review. And it looks like they're going to actually be doing their job of reviewing cannabis's placement in the treaty and determining what needs to be changed based on the new evidence since 1935. I think there's a little bit of new evidence.
Well, that's really exciting because they've actually not been a fan of cannabis over the last few years. So they're coming around, and it's because of the hard work that you and your friends are doing. And Michael, thank you so much for being out there for all of us.
Well, I appreciate it, and I'll come back anytime and let you know what's going on the front lines.
Thanks, buddy. We'll talk to you real soon. We'll be right back after this.
In the night, when you're all alone with the one that you call your own, ask yourself if you're doing good. Give yourself some positive vibration. Well, the skies, they look down on you, and the stars, they will guide you through. On this plane that we all live on, give yourself some positive vibration. Some positive vibration. Too many wanderers are wandering. Too many wanderers are wandering. Too many squanderers are squandering. Let that sun come shining through. Give yourself some positive vibrations. Give yourself some positive vibrations.
Well, thank you, Michael Krawitz. You are certainly a wealth of current information, and thanks for fighting for all of us. Also, I want to thank my two radio mentors, both with the initials HS. Thank you for your inspiration. If you'd like to be a guest on the show, if you're an advocate like Mike, and I like Mike, it's info@mmjradio.com. If you have a product, if you're a patient, want to tell your story about how cannabis is helping you, if you've cured your cancer, if you've gone into remission, info@mmjradio.com. If you'd like to hear some of our older programs, medicalmarijuanaradio.com has them. Also, mmjradio.com gets you to the same place. My YouTube channel is LSLove88. On SoundCloud and Spreaker, we are MMJ Radio. We're available on CannabisTube.net. Also on Spreaker and iHeartRadio is the Time for Hemp Global Broadcasting Network, playing our shows. On Now TV, channel 937. And we're also heard on 420radio.org.
The magical marijuana. Shalabah. Shalom.
Oh yeah, and fuck Trump.